Okay.
Oh, really?
And we're rolling.
Oops.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So we want to talk about tactics and dealing with ethical issues out in the field. Um, actually, uh, we run our business, you know, following the PRSA Code of Ethics. So that keeps you, from going off the rails, and it's, very, very easy and clear. You're for full transparency, and you're promoting your client. You're open about promoting your client. You're accurate, and you don't mislead. As long as you do that, you're going to be fine. Um, and providing your clients with good representation that will benefit their business. If we're asked to do something that is unethical or questionable, you know, we'll advise the client against it. And if the client insists, then we don't do that. But in the 15 years I've been here, I don't recall that happening.
Well, some organizations, like there was a company in Tennessee, for example, that wanted to do alcohol promotions for Jack Daniels, and they went to a public relations firm in Texas that was against alcohol. So for their firm, that was considered to be something that was unethical for them, so they didn't do it. Now,
Sure.
I understand, that's a simple level, but does, St. John's have any ethical guidelines for how they conduct?
Well, we are known for doing a lot of retail advertising and public relations. So driving traffic into stores to buy things. We worked with Ford dealer groups for about 27 years. So helping sell cars and driving traffic into dealerships. And then we also had, we do Zaxby's, and we've helped them grow from 125 outlets to almost 600 in 13 states. So we drive traffic, and are we okay still?
Mhm.
The
All
light's
right.
still on, so it's
Oh,
still
the
working.
lights
As long
are
as the
on.
light's on, it's good.
Lights are on and no one's home.
And we can just edit this later,
Yeah, we're
so
gonna
it'll
go
be
back
okay.
and edit everything.
Yeah. So we drive traffic into stores. We're known for that. Until we picked up the lottery account, we hadn't done anything that associated with gambling. We don't do politics. We do not. We choose not to be involved in political races. That's not what we do. That's not what we're. Some firms are very good at that. We choose not to do that. We've not done tobacco, and we haven't done alcohol. It's just a choice that was made early on, but more importantly, we've kind of developed a niche in the retail space, and then doing professional services like Terrell Hogan Law Firm. We did a couple of other professional services organizations, and there's plenty of money to be made there, and there are some organizations that will take on more controversial clients, and that's great. We've chosen, and we've got our hands full with what we're doing, but we're always looking at growing those businesses, and then seeking out other businesses that could complement that client work.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how involved you are on the PR side, but do you guys typically come into encounters where you have to put spin on things to be able to show more positive light on a regular basis? Is that more something that happens infrequently in your line?
Well, first off, we don't spin. We tell the truth.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean we can't be very forceful or, get the message out. And a lot of times it means going to either the news media or other influencers to give them information, give them updates so that they understand the full story, or when we're representing our client. We're very open about who our clients are. And we don't shade the truth. And that's where spin comes in, where you're telling half-truths or trying to lead someone to thinking that may not be completely accurate. And we will help our clients get their story out and help their business. And certainly in reputation management, we've done that with a number of businesses. In fact, I'm dealing with one right now that just keeps getting pummeled, and really it's just now down to one media outlet that continues with some very one-sided coverage. But there again, that client is a little media averse. They don't like to go on camera, so it's having to deal with, a statement was issued, but this one media outlet, basically, emails a message at 5:45 and is doing a live shot at 5:59, and that way they can say, we contacted the company and haven't gotten a response, in 15 minutes, and they're headquartered out of state, so it's a little unfair, but we know what we're dealing with there.
Okay. Now, spin may have not been the best word.
No, that's
but,
okay.
Positive. Can you give us an example of a neutral situation that has the potential to have a negative impact on a potential client? What are some of the tactics that you would employ to?
Well, I can give you a case history. How's that?
That works.
There's a section of town in Jacksonville that's known as South Metro. South Metro, we named it. It was an area that is south of the San Marco and St. Nicholas area, so basically south of Atlantic Boulevard, going down Phillips Highway and over to Emerson Street, and then curving back up Emerson to where it meets Beach Boulevard. Especially along Phillips Highway, you had several businesses that had invested heavily, especially right there at the corner of where Phillips, Emerson, and I-95 are, is a office park. There had been an old Holiday Inn there, and there were some dilapidated buildings, and there was the ice arena. And it had been actually a shopping mall that had been built back in the 50s. That a lot of transients were coming through. There were also some older motels along Phillips Highway. And there was a lot of prostitution. These business owners had been investing in their properties, and the state had done a beautification project along Phillips, but it was still known as just being a place where hookers were. And they said, we're investing a lot of money on this, and we're beautifying, but we're getting no traction. And the hotel was taken down, it was demolished, the office park was being built out of the mall, and they said, what can we do? And they contracted our firm to try to come up with a way to market that area. We looked at that and said, well, let's take a look at some of the names. How is it described? And of course, when you start doing a media search of the area and looking at media coverage, some people called it the South Side, some called it San Marco, they didn't know what to call it, and actually it wasn't designated on a map. So through some of that research, we took a look at it and said, well, we can come up with a name, and we worked with the businesses in the area, community leaders, and came up with the name South Metro based on a lot of research, because there used to be the city of South Jacksonville where San Marco is. It was actually a separate city until the late 1920s. So this was just south of the Metro Center. They liked the name.
Do you mind if I interject?
Yeah.
When you did your test group for the name, did you just use your clients, or did you also reach out to the people and see
Well,
what Jacksonville's thoughts were in that area?
we didn't reach out to the whole area of Jacksonville. What we were looking at was the business owners who were affected, and we worked with the city council member representing that area. And once the name was chosen out of several, but South Metro really bubbled to the top, and we came up with some graphics for it, presented that to the business owners group. They liked it, showed it to the city council representative, and then worked with her to introduce a resolution that would designate that by the city as South Metro. And then we also sought that, using that designation from the city, went to the U.S. Geological Survey with the, I think they're with the Department of the Interior, but I can't remember, but I remember it was the USGS. And the reason for that is if the federal government, USGS, designates an area with a name like that, it will show up on maps, official maps. It also designates an area that then they can apply for federal grants for upgrades for businesses through the, I think they're UDAG grants, but they're Urban Development Action Grants, UDAG.
Well, so that definitely helps.
So it definitely helps. We got the city council to pass the resolution, and then 6-9 months later, after we had already completed the work, we did get the letter from the U.S. Geological Survey accepting it and designating the specific borders for what is now South Metro. Prior to that, as soon as we had the city council, we did some education with local media outlets to say, your news coverage is not consistent, and actually, now that the city council has passed this, please remember that if you're doing a story in this area, you should identify it as South Metro in the chyron on the lower third of the screen, as well as in any copy for voiceover. The client was very pleased because now, instead of being just described as Phillips Highway area or that corridor, it became the South Metro area, Jacksonville's South Metro neighborhood. And they were very pleased because a lot of beneficial changes had already taken place, but the old name and the connection to prostitution problems, which had been abated, were still dogging the area, and that's not as true anymore.
Well, let's see. It definitely covers our ethical issues. So, can you give us some examples? Now that you are at the senior level, I know you're more of administrative back office. Is there anything about your day-to-day activities or the day-to-day activities of some of your field workers that you'd like to share?
My normal day, I will check some email from home on a mobile device, but as soon as I come in, checking email, also specifically checking our monitoring services for clients. And as soon as I came in this morning, I actually got with my boss and I said, I want to make sure you saw that this was in the paper today regarding one of our clients. He said, yeah, I actually got an email at 5:30 this morning. I said, and not only that, but they got the client's name misspelled. Instead of his last name being right, they called him White.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Fact error.
Yeah, fact error.
Yeah, 50 points.
Yeah, and that reporter, I'm sure will get a phone call, or will call his editor to say, oh, by the way, there was a fact error in that story. And it turns out that editor was also teaching at UNF in the writing course, so this will be very close to his heart.
Hopefully, lesson learned then.
He'll have a discussion with the reporter.
Something to tell his UNF students, maybe.
Yeah. And this is a reporter who's been in that paper for a long time, so it's just, yeah, it's just unacceptable. But it's one of those things we can kind of laugh at also. Um, but from there, I also put together a clip report for one of the clients, and kind of a ongoing, if there's stuff going on, uh, you know, I can put together something that can be emailed over to the client. So, here's stories not only about you, but here's some about competition, and then here's some trends in your industry that, we think you ought to keep an eye on or be aware of that could impact the business. So it's not just looking in the rearview mirror, look what got covered. It's also, here are some trends or here's some news in the industry that we think could shape your business, and that's important, is to lead. And then I assist the team. There may be a specific program that's going on that they're trying to pull together clips, and I'll help them with that, or they'll share with me what they're getting. And then we're in strategy sessions, and I'll be reviewing news releases or PR plans, and providing some guidance on that to take a look at the strategy as well as the tactics. But what's the strategy? What are our objectives, and are we going to properly measure it? Because if you're not measuring, then you really can't say whether you're moving the needle at all. And if we like to say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Which brings me to my next thing. How exactly do you, public relations, we work a lot with the public, so we're dealing a lot with, intangible results, if you will. So how is it exactly that you measure? Now, I know, obviously, traffic drives dollars, but are there other ways, like,
oh, sure,
educational, like, assessments, anything like that?
Well, and that's where you lay out your objectives that are measurable. So you state, within 30 days we will achieve, this increase in sales because of, this activity, or,
Do you use anything as measurements other than sales, other than dollars?
Oh, sure. One of them, like South Metro, can we get this neighborhood named and change the perception, of the public of this? And it's not going to happen overnight, but you get the name changed. You focus on what businesses are going, what's happening there. You're working with the city council member who's working with other influencers throughout the city, who can be talking about all the changes and all the benefits. And then of course the police are going to be involved, because there had been prostitution or drug problems, and they can say, actually, if you look at the crime statistics, there's problems in other areas as opposed to this, and you change your perception. So you can measure quite a bit. The secret is not measuring your outputs. When I worked for a state agency, I was asked, how many news releases per month do you plan to put out? And my answer was, if I do my job right, 0. And the new PR director was kind of taken aback. She said, no, we've got to know how many we're doing every month. I said, if I do my job right, I would write 0, and here's why. I can pick up the phone or shoot an email to someone, and it can be a similar pitch, but I can customize that pitch with the same information to 3 or 4 different news outlets. If each of them has a different angle of that story, but each of them does the story, I've got 3 or 4 stories on the same subject. If I write a news release and send it, it's going to take probably a day to write it, or I might be able to write it in an hour, hour and a half, do some editing, but then run it through different departments for review and approval. That's fast tracking is going to take 1 day. It could take 3 days. It could take 5 days or a week. So now we're more than a week of time. And then if I send it to a reporter or send it to a bunch of reporters, they're going to figure everybody else in town got this. So it's not customized. So if I take that same information that would have been in the news release, but I just put it in a couple of bullet points and suggest they talk to this person or that person, and I find it a little different angle from each one, the results will be much greater. And my new boss said, well, yeah, that makes sense. And it was just a little different way of thinking of it, but because I came from a reporting background, that's what I thought of. And I've actually heard other reporters say, they'll ask, do you have a news release? I said, well, yeah, I can, but I wanted to give this to you early, or, and a lot of times we may pitch something early and say, yeah, the release is going to go out on Thursday morning, but, I wanted to give it to you, early under embargo. You can post the story at, as of 6 a.m. on Thursday, before we announce it, but nothing before that. And, media are always looking for an exclusive. So you can play that, and that's a good tactic.
Create that buzz with the different.
Well, create the buzz, but also, ultimately, can you, get an announcement out there and, pitch that idea that, each outlet is going to be looking for a little bit different, and that's the secret, is having that knowledge. What are they looking for? Different TV stations will cover news differently, and you've got to kind of be clued in on that. What are their hot buttons? What are they looking for? And understand also the news business, that some days a lot of stuff's going on and you're not going to get covered. It happens.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. Would you like to?
You want to jump in the hot seat?
I think one thing you forgot to ask was just, do you have any recommendations for public relations students, things that we could be doing now to help us later?
Ask questions. Ask lots of questions. Public relations students should be joining PRSSA. Not only joining it, but being active in it. It helps develop some leadership skills and organizational skills and time management skills. More importantly, you are interacting more with members of the professional society, PRSA, because once you graduate, that's where you're going to be joining, and you can pretty much automatically go from PRSSA to PRSA as an associate member. So, for your first 2 years out of college, it's like $65 a year plus the $35 for the local chapter dues. So, and that can be written off on your taxes if your employer doesn't pay for it. But really, being involved in PRSSA is very, very beneficial. And then, you're going to have to do some internships. But by being involved in those kind of organizations, in addition to the internships, and then being in contact with, asking your professors, asking adjunct faculty who are out there in the business, ask lots of questions, spend time with them, pick their brain. And it doesn't have to be for a class project. If you're seeing a trend or something, curate some information. You find an article that's interesting, email it to that person. You're networking. But, if you see an article and say, I thought you might find this valuable, or I have a question, is this really a trend that I'm seeing, or what are your insights on this? You're networking with people who might be able to help you down the road, but more importantly, you're providing them with some information. Personally, I like to see is a student interested in learning? Are they thinking? And are they self-motivated? There are plenty of smart students out there, but if they're not self-motivated, if they don't want to learn, there's nothing I can do to do that. If you've ever ridden a horse, or had a horse hitched up to a wagon or something, you'd rather be able to pull the reins in and direct them than to have to crack a whip. You don't want to crack a whip. So I'd rather be able to steer that person and mentor them. And there's a difference between mentoring and managing. And actually, you can be a great manager by mentoring, but I think it's more valuable also. And that's what I see myself, and actually what I've kind of been described for other staff is I'm a mentor for the rest of the PR team as well as elsewhere in the agency. Probably because I've been here longer than anybody else.
And very diverse in your background. So
Yeah,
running the newsroom
I've
definitely helps.
I've had a couple of jobs.
Now, I'm sure everyone wants to know interns that come here to St. John Partners.
Mhm.
What are their tasks? What do you have your interns do?
Interns in the PR practice at St. John and Partners are going to do a lot of research. They're going to do, they're going to help with some of the clip reports. So not only gathering news coverage of something, but also then helping measure it and grade it. Was it positive, negative, or neutral? You know, what what kind of circulation numbers do the newspapers have? What are their website traffic numbers for broadcast properties? Are they highly rated, lowly rated? What's the viewership? Because if now the client might be very excited that they were on a cable access show. A cable access show that's maybe seen by tens of people, 5 times a week. The numbers are low. But if, even if it's only seen by tens of people, but those are very influential people, that can make a difference. So it's knowing what to measure and how to measure it. It's like, CNBC or MSNBC, very focused on business. From a broadcast standpoint, their numbers are fairly small, but it's a very influential group that is watching certain shows at certain times of the day. So if you get a CEO of a publicly traded company on Squawk Box or on Morning Joe on MSNBC, a 2-minute interview on Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough for your CEO, that's like gold. Now it's up to him to hit it out of the park, but you've also done your homework to prepare them for that interview. So the interns are going to be doing a lot of that measurement. They're going to do a lot of research for our different clients. If Zaxby's is going to be opening a restaurant in Sylvester, Georgia, say, I want to know who all of the influencers are in Sylvester, Georgia. And that isn't just who's the elected leaders. Who's the fire chief? Who's the police chief? Who's the high school football coach? Who are the pastors of the churches? Because all of those people influence others. And if we want to have the grand opening party, I want all of those community influencers there to get a free meal and taste the food and be able to meet the licensee of that restaurant, who can tell them how deep their roots are in the community and they want to be involved in the community and help different groups. That's what builds business. It's not a one-shot deal. It's for the long term, but you have to start out on the right foot. So they're going to be doing a lot of that kind of research, and then they're going to be involved in a lot of strategy sessions and brainstorming as we come up with promotions, or if there's a promotion that's going to go on with a client. you know, I want them to be participating because some of the best ideas will come from somebody that, you know, has a different viewpoint and is not jaded or, you know, hasn't done something. And more importantly, I also want the interns to ask questions. There are no stupid questions except the one you should have asked 3 or 6 weeks ago but were embarrassed to then. Now you're really embarrassed, but you need the answer. There are no stupid questions. You know, ask. That's why you're here, to learn. And really to learn, is this going to be a good fit for me? Is this the career I want? We actually had one intern who was great, and we thought, wow, this kid has got a future. And after working for a semester here as an intern, he just said, you know what? I found I don't want to do public relations. He would have been good at it, but it's a safe way to kind of try out a career and see what that career path is going to be.
Now, I know SJMP hires a lot of interns. So, once you actually get hired on, you're obviously a little bit more specialized. What are your tools of assessment, if you will, or criteria that you're looking for as far as the specialized area? Is there a guideline to that?
Well, really, we all start out as generalists, and still in public relations, we're all generalists in this agency and most agencies. We do not specialize in financial relations, so we're not dealing. I need to know how to read a balance sheet and do a little bit of accounting, but we're not specialized where we're dealing with. There are a couple of companies like Kexton Company that do bankruptcy communications, and if there's going to be an initial public offering for a stock or something, a company's going to go public. There are some very specialized, focused communications, and that's where a specialist firm is going to be very good. We can assist with that, and I know how it's done, but they do it day in and day out. It's like knowing how to change a washer on your faucet and actually replumbing the house. You know a little bit about it, but if it's really going to be heavy duty and you're dealing with federal regulations with the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's when you go and get that specialist to help with your normal PR firm. But for the most part, we're all generalists. Some of us have marketing experience, some of us have editorial and news experience, some of us have been on the client side and then gotten into the agency. So we all come from little different viewpoints, but we all have the same basic skills.
No, it's just my opinion, but I really do feel like more and more agencies are headed that way. As far as journalists, you really want to have a nice melting pot of everyone that can contribute differently. But and speaking more onto the skills that you like to see, is there any classes that you would recommend students take, or at least areas where you wouldn't necessarily think that was something that you would need with the PR?
Well, outside of your core curriculum, I think every student should take macro and microeconomics. They also should take at least the intro to accounting so that you can balance your checkbook, but more importantly, understand and be able to read a balance sheet, because you're going to be dealing with businesses, and you've got to, you also have to think like a business. Our business here, it's based on, you have to estimate how many hours are we going to need to service this client, and then come up with a number based on that. If we're going to spend on a client 400 hours per month, and we're going to be using certain people, they bill out at different rates. They may bill out at $75, $100, $125, $150, $200 an hour. You're not going to have the people billing out at $200 an hour doing all of the work. You want to try to get it at a lower level, but and you understand if you're on a retainer, that means level billing pretty much every month. So some months will be, you're going to be higher number of hours, some months will be lower, but it'll average out, as opposed to, say, on a project, which is a very short-term duration. Therefore, okay, we're going to estimate this many hours, and our billing rate is this, so this is what our, we're going to quote and bill. And if it's going to go over, then you have to write that into the contract. That if the scope of work changes, expands, or more hours are going to be needed, we can bill that to the client. So understanding business is very important. And I know a lot of PR people, English majors, journalism majors, really, never took those courses. I'm not good with numbers. Well, you have to be. And, everything is kind of merging. It used to be, you had just newspapers, radio, and television. Then there was the internet. Now there's social media in addition to that. And there are citizen reporters. And, you've got to be able to speak all those languages. And you have to speak the language of numbers. Because ultimately, if you're going to be working as a consultant or an advisor to clients, you have to be able to speak their language. So I have to speak the language of the CEO and the chief financial officer. They're numbers based. I have to be able to speak numbers and know what I'm talking about. So it's very important.
How difficult is it?
But I would say geography, take some political science. So you know what's going on in the world. And knowing borders, knowing where Bulgaria is, or Zaire. 15 years ago, most people couldn't tell you, 10 years ago, they couldn't tell you where Afghanistan was. What's the difference between Iraq and Iran? Knowing those things. You've got to be curious. You've got to take some science. So go ahead and, you're probably going to knock out biology, but that's core curriculum. But take some creative writing, take some literature, take as much writing as you can outside of the core. Don't be afraid to take a couple of extra classes so that, you're not graduating with the bare minimum. I know your advisors will say, oh, well, if you just do this, you'll have the minimum and you can go. Why do you want to settle with the minimum? Do better, because then it demonstrates to me as a potential employer that you're more well-rounded. You've thought about this, you made the investment, and you bring all sorts of additional knowledge that somebody else doesn't have, who just has the minimum. So, look at it from that point. Take the long view. It's going to make you better prepared. And I actually had to have this argument with at my school when I was in school, and I wanted to have an extra writing course. They said, but you don't need it. I said, yes, but I want it. They said, but you don't need this. I said, well, it will make me better prepared for after I graduate, and would make me a better employee for someone, which would reflect better on the school, don't you think? And of course, their answer was, but you don't need it. And I said, but I want it. And we kept going at that point, and at some point I just said, who is paying the bill here? He said, well, you are. I said, then why are we having this conversation? At which point, I was able to sign up for the course. But also, there again, it was an advisor in the journalism school, and I was also asked, why are you, continually asking, questioning us about this? And I said, well, that's what you teach us here in journalism school, is to ask questions and question authority. Yeah, the why question just, kind of rubbed them the wrong way. But there again, there are no wrong questions. And if you're honest about it, you know, that's great. You know, more than anything else, I want you to be curious. I like playing trivia. I have, you know, a vast storehouse of nearly useless knowledge between my ears, taking up space. But you'd be surprised when it comes into play in this kind of business. Little stuff, and it's just, you know, how do you learn? If you read something, do you retain it? If you hear it or see it, do you retain it? And, you know, find out how you learn best and exploit that. Use it to your advantage. Because that kind of little stuff, you know, you might retain a little nugget or, you know, and it comes into play. And it's an awful lot of fun. You know from being in my class that, you know, I have a couple of stories that might illustrate a point that, you know, you will remember. You know, remember stories, come up with stories, because it helps you remember facts and ideas.
And a lot of the side things that we talked about, like you know, the tanks and that type of stuff, you know, you really gotta take the initiative. You
Yeah.
go that extra step and try to bend the rules a little bit to get that nugget. If you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
Within reason, of course. But.
Yeah, I was a TV reporter and was getting a tour of Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is where the U.S. Army's armored school is. And I was a reporter from a town where they built the M1 Abrams tank. And they let us drive an M60 tank, which was, you know, Vietnam era. So this was in the early 80s. The M1 was the tank that was replacing the M60. They wouldn't let us see it because there were still some problems with the M1, with the turbine engines. And I had told the class that, you know, while we were standing there kind of bored out of our minds as they're, you know, giving us a briefing about some truck, a colonel came across, and, you know, I recognized I had not been in the military, but I knew what the insignias were for different ranks. And I saw this guy was a colonel, which means he had a silver eagle on his collar, which means he's just below general. He's really high up in the command. And he said, "Hey boys, what you doing?" And I said, "Well, you know, we're here, we're doing this, and, you know, we're from Lima, Ohio, and we were hoping to see some M1 tanks, but they're not letting us see them." He said, "You want to see some M1s? I'll take you to see them." It's like, so I had to kind of motion to my cameraman. It's like, "Come on, get in this, you know, in his SUV." And, you know, the guy from the radio station saw it and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just get in the SUV, quiet. We're going to go see some M1s." And as I'm getting in, you know, the colonel is coming around to get in the driver's seat, and this little second lieutenant comes running up and said, "Where are you going?" And I just said, "It's okay. We're going to go see some M1 tanks." And she said, "No, you can't do that." I said, No, it's okay. It's been approved."
It's been approved.
She said, "No, you can't do that." And I just said, "Lieutenant, you tell the colonel he can't take us." And the colonel just smiled and said, "What time do you need him back?" And he took us up, and we saw some M1s and got to interview some of the guys, and it made a much better TV story because it was local, where, you know, they were made there. But it was something that, you know, if I hadn't really asked and been a little more aggressive, I would have never gotten. So, you know, don't be afraid to ask, because the worst thing they can say is no. You know, and if the colonel had just decided, "Well, no, I can't take it," well, you know, doesn't hurt to ask.
And I believe that was the shot that made the wire with that tank.
Yeah, that was actually we used that in that became the news open, because we went up this old logging road, and this is in the woods in northern Kentucky, and, you know, he said, "Yeah, they're just up ahead," and about a quarter mile ahead, you could see this tank coming down the hill towards us. And he slammed on his brakes and kicked up this cloud of dust. And he said, "Just wait." and I'm rolling tape. I had grabbed the camera. I was in the back of the SUV, and I'm shooting through the window, and all of a sudden, you see the gun come right out of the cloud, and the tank is hurtling towards us at about 35 miles an hour. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's not stopping. And the suspension on the M1 tank is really, really neat. Not only that, but the gun turret, I think, is on some sort of gyro, so that they're not the body of the tank might be bouncing, but the gunner is seeing very smooth, and they can fire very precisely while they're going over logs. And that gun is steady. Yeah, it was really scary because you realize it's coming right at you, and if they wanted to fire at you, they could, and they would hit you. So and at the last minute, he slowed down and pivoted around us, which was
a
really
little
cool.
show, yeah.
Yeah, so that shot of a tank blasting through, coming through a cloud of dust, was what became the news open in that for that NBC affiliate.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it was neat.
But shows you got to have the initiative, right?
Yeah.
Think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to ask. You got to know where the line is, and you don't step over the line. You don't get arrested.
Especially on a military base.
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially.
Don't you guys have any questions? I think we covered everything.
Good.
Well, Patrick, thank you very much for your
You
time.
bet. You
Appreciate
bet.
it.
Glad you're here.
Yeah,
Apply for internships.
definitely. Definitely.
Well, we gotta edit it out, and if you want, I can email you a copy of the power slide.
Yeah.
What's your email address again?
It's Patrick McSweeney, PATRICK MCS